The House on Black Hill. Alex had always been the skeptic in his village, a boy who scoffed at tales of the supernatural and the unknown. To him, the stories that the villagers whispered around campfires and during cold winter nights were nothing more than ghost stories meant to scare children. The one tale that intrigued him the most was that of the House on Black Hill, a dark, ominous structure perched in the hill that overlooked the village like a vulture waiting for its next meal. The villagers claimed the house was cursed, alive with the tortured souls of those who had dared to enter and never returned. It was said that the house fed on the fear of the living, consuming anyone foolish enough to step inside. For Alex, the legend was just that, a legend. So when his friends dared him to explore the house, he accepted without hesitation. The thought of proving everyone wrong excited him. He was going to be the one who would return from Black Hill unscathed, with a story of how he had conquered the fears that had held the village in thrall for generations. As dusk settled over the village, casting long shadows across the landscape, Alex made his way up Black Hill. The path was steep and winding, the air growing colder with each step. The house loomed ahead, an imposing silhouette against the darkening sky. Its windows were dark and empty, like lifeless eyes staring down at him, and its walls were covered in creeping ivy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. When Alex reached the front door, he paused for a moment, taking in the eerie stillness that surrounded the house. The village below was far behind him now, the lights of home barely visible through the trees. He felt a twinge of unease but quickly pushed it aside. He had come this far. There was no turning back. He reached out and pushed the door open. It creaked on its rusted hinges, and as soon as he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that rattled the walls. Alex spun around, but the door was now locked, the handle cold and unyielding under his hand. The air inside the house was thick and musty, filled with the scent of rot and decay. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath his feet, and the walls seemed to groan, as if the house were alive and aware of his presence. Undeterred, Alex moved deeper into the house. The interior was dark, the only light coming from the fading twilight that filtered through the grimy windows. Dust hung in the air, and cobwebs draped the corners like ancient curtains. As he walked, he began to hear strange noises, footsteps echoing down empty hallways, whispers that seemed to come from the very walls themselves, and the soft, scraping sound of something dragging along the floor. The house seemed to shift around him, the layout changing as he moved from room to room. Hallways that should have led back to the entrance instead twisted and turned into unfamiliar corridors. Doors that had been open moments before were now sealed shut, and new doorways appeared where there had been none. It was as if the house were a living, breathing creature, trapping him within its labyrinthine interior. As the hours wore on, Alex's confidence began to wane. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the house itself seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The walls trembled and groaned, the floor beneath him vibrating with a rhythmic thrum that matched his own racing heartbeat. The house was feeding on his fear, drawing strength from his growing sense of dread. Finally, Alex found a staircase leading down to the basement. He hesitated at the top of the stairs, peering into the darkness below. The air that wafted up from the basement was damp and cold, carrying with it the faint stench of decay. He knew that whatever secrets the house held, they were hidden in the depths below. With a deep breath, Alex descended the staircase. The steps creaked under his weight, and the further down he went, the colder the air became. He reached the bottom and found himself in a large, cavernous room. The walls were slick with moisture, and the floor was covered in a thin layer of slimy black sludge. It was then that he felt it. A cold, slimy tendril brushing against his leg. He looked down in horror to see the floor itself beginning to move, the sludge writhing and coiling like living flesh. Panic surged through him, and he turned to flee, but the floor beneath him split open, revealing a gaping maw lined with sharp, jagged teeth. The walls around him trembled, the flesh-like material pulsing with a sickening rhythm. He tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness as the maw closed around him, dragging him down into the depths of the house. The house consumed him, absorbing him into its structure, his body becoming one with the walls and floors. His screams joined the chorus of voices that echoed through the house, a cacophony of tortured souls forever trapped within its living, breathing confines. The next morning, the house on Black Hill stood silent and still, its windows dark and empty. The villagers, unaware of what had transpired, continued to live in fear of the house, its curse remaining unbroken. And the house waited, its hunger sated for now, but always ready to claim its next victim. The Midnight Morgue. St. Augustine's Hospital, a once thriving medical institution, has been abandoned for decades. The morgue, located in the hospital's basement, is said to be the most haunted place in the building. The legend goes that at midnight, the spirits of those who died in the hospital rise from their slabs, seeking revenge on the living. Liam, a thrill seeker with a love for ghost hunting, convinces his friends to spend the night in the morgue. Armed with cameras and ghost hunting equipment, they break into the hospital on Halloween night, determined to capture evidence of the paranormal. The air is thick with the scent of decay, and the silence is oppressive as they make their way down to the morgue. The morgue is cold and dark, the metal slabs covered in dust and grime. The group sets up their equipment, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. As they wait for midnight to strike, they begin to hear strange noises. Footsteps echoing down the empty hallways, the faint sound of whispering voices, and the unmistakable creak of metal. As the clock strikes midnight, the room grows colder, and the lights flicker out, plunging the group into darkness. The metal slabs begin to creak and groan, as if something is moving beneath them. The whispering voices grow louder, more frantic, and the group realizes too late that they are not alone. The doors to the morgue slam shut, trapping them inside. The temperature drops even further, their breath visible in the freezing air. One by one, the metal slabs begin to move, the bodies of the long-dead patients rising from their eternal rest. The corpses, their faces twisted in pain and anger, surround the group, their hollow eyes fixed on the intruders. Liam and his friends try to escape, but the corpses are relentless, their cold, lifeless hands gripping their arms and legs, dragging them towards the slabs. The spirits of the dead patients, tortured by their untimely deaths, seek vengeance on those who disturbed their rest. The group is forced onto the slabs, their bodies frozen in place as the corpses prepare to claim their souls. Just as the spirits are about to exact their final revenge, the clock strikes 1 and the lights flicker back on. The corpses collapse back onto the slabs, lifeless once more. The doors to the morgue swing open and the group is left alone, their hearts pounding in their chests. But as they stumble out of the hospital, they realize that something has changed. Their faces are pale, their eyes hollow, and their movements stiff and unnatural. The spirits of the dead patients have taken over their bodies, leaving their own souls trapped in the cold, dark morgue, waiting for the next group of ghost hunters to make the same mistake. The Cemetery Watcher. Old Willow. Cemetery has long been a place of unease for the residents of the nearby town. The graves are ancient, the headstones weathered and cracked, their inscriptions barely legible. The cemetery is said to be watched over by a mysterious figure, a cemetery watcher who ensures that the dead rest undisturbed. But the townsfolk whisper that the watcher is not a protector, but a harbinger of doom for those who dare to disrespect the dead. Jack, a skeptic who scoffs at ghost stories, bets his friends that he can spend the night in Old Willow Cemetery without getting scared. Armed with a flashlight and a bottle of whiskey, he climbs over the cemetery gates at midnight, laughing off the warnings of his friends. The night is cold and still, the moon hidden behind a thick layer of clouds, casting the cemetery in deep shadows. As Jack wanders through the rows of graves, he feels an odd sense of being watched. The wind whistles through the trees, and the leaves rustle like whispered secrets. He passes by a large, decrepit mausoleum and hears a faint scraping sound coming from within. Curious, he approaches the heavy stone door and tries to peer inside, but the darkness is impenetrable. He shrugs it off and continues his walk, but the feeling of being watched only grows stronger. The air seems to thicken, and the shadows around him deepen, as if something is lurking just out of sight. He hears a soft rustling behind him and whips around, but there's nothing there. Only rows of silent, weathered graves. As he approaches the oldest part of the cemetery, Jack's flashlight begins to flicker. He curses under his breath and smacks it against his palm, trying to get it to work. The light sputters back to life, but in the brief moment of darkness, he glimpses a figure standing among the graves, a tall, shadowy form with glowing eyes, watching him intently. Jack's bravado begins to wane as the figure steps forward, its movement slow and deliberate. He calls out, thinking it might be one of his friends playing a prank, but there's no answer. The figure is draped in tattered black robes, its face hidden in shadow. As it approaches, the air grows colder, and Jack's breath comes out in visible puffs of mist. Panicking, Jack turns and runs, his footsteps echoing through the silent cemetery. The figure follows, its pace unnervingly slow, yet it always seems to be just behind him. Jack stumbles over a gravestone and falls to the ground, the flashlight slipping from his grasp and rolling into the darkness. Desperate, Jack crawls towards the cemetery gates, but as he reaches them, he finds the gate is locked tight, the iron bars cold and unyielding. He spins around to see the figure standing just a few feet away, its glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. The figure raises a skeletal hand and points towards a freshly dug grave nearby, its meaning clear. Jack's heart races as he realizes the grave has his name on it. The earth begins to shift and churn, the dirt piling up on either side as the grave opens wide. The figure steps aside and Jack feels an invisible force pushing him towards the grave, his feet dragging against the ground as he struggles to resist. He screams for help, but the cemetery is silent, the town beyond it oblivious to his cries. The ground beneath him gives way, and he tumbles into the open grave, the dirt collapsing in around him. As the last of the soil covers his face, the figure steps back, its duty complete. The next morning, the cemetery gates are found unlocked, swinging gently in the breeze. Jack's friends search for him but find no trace. Only the freshly filled grave with his name etched on the headstone. The cemetery watcher continues to patrol Old Willow Cemetery, ensuring that the dead remain undisturbed and that those who challenge its authority are buried alongside them.